watching BBC One, linking up now to bring you events through the night with BBC News 24.
On the wider front, yes, across the province, that is the worry, in that they have managed to come to this Good Friday Agreement. An assembly's been set up, a First Minister and his deputy, a Catholic, the First Minister a Protestant. It did appear that perhaps this was a formula towards some sort of peaceful future for Northern Ireland. Within weeks, if not hours, this confrontation here at Drumcree has brought out all the bitterness, a lot of the violence again, back onto the streets. And it is a worry if they can't solve this one in particular, as we now approach the 12th day, which is the zenith of all these Protestant Orange Order marches, then how can they think of trying to organise a formula that gives some sort of lasting peace and a way of making the communities live together in the long-term future?
John Thorne in Drumcree, thank you. The Nigerian opposition leader, Chief Moshood Abiola, died of natural causes as a result of long-standing heart disease, according to the preliminary results of a post-mortem carried out by a team of international pathologists. The announcement came shortly after hundreds of people attended Chief Abiola's funeral, 4 days after he died in military detention.
It was a scrum without the dignity of a funeral, as the masses scrambled to catch a glimpse of Chief Abiola's corpse. This was the man they had elected president, but who's been kept hidden from the outside world in detention ever since. The family had wanted a private funeral, but it was simply impossible to keep the crowds away. His supporters wanted it to be a people's burial, and they couldn't get close enough to their dead hero. This is Nigeria's desperation for democracy in raw display. Outside the gates, there was fury that the military had dared to turn up on the only day the people could spend with their man, who the military had kept from them for 4 years. The police were careful and withdrew to surrounding streets, aware of the explosive mood. It was not a day for confrontation. Today, the people were in charge. A team of foreign doctors carried out a post-mortem on Chief Abiola last night to allay allegations that he'd been murdered. Today they announced that he had died of natural causes, at least from their initial conclusions.
At this time, our preliminary opinion is that the death was due to natural causes as a result of long-standing heart disease.
Their preliminary findings, though, haven't yet been accepted by the family.
You can find people having that kind of condition, living for over 30 years, 50 years, to become 100, to become 80.
As the mourning for Chief Abiola continues, the fears for the political impact of his death grow too. At the very time when compromise is needed to secure the country's future, many feel it's too late.
Chief Abiola was a symbol of hopes for democracy, but his death has reawakened dangerous tensions. And ironically, a man whose legacy should have been peace has left bitterness and uncertainty behind. Hilary Anderson, BBC News, Lagos.
3 years ago, thousands of Bosnian men disappeared when the Serbs seized the town of Srebrenica. Mass graves were found outside the town when it was liberated. The relatives of many of the missing still don't know exactly what happened to their loved ones. Now they're demanding action from the international community to solve one of the war's worst crimes.
For 3 years, the women of Srebrenica have kept up their campaign to find out what happened to their loved ones. The list of the missing, as many as 7,000 men and boys, was carried through Sarajevo to the embassies of the countries whom most blame for their fate, the Netherlands, Britain and France. For many of the survivors, like this mother, the pain of not knowing hurts just as much 3 years on. For the international community, there's a sense of shame.
The international community did at last get its act together. Part of that was because of the guilt which it felt because of what had happened here. There's no question that this is the worst, there's the worst war crime that has happened in Europe since the Second World War.
So far, there's been only one conviction at the Hague Tribunal for the Srebrenica killings. But the man with most to answer for is General Ratko Mladic, the Bosnian Serb commander. He remains at large, indicted for war crimes. It was the general who presided over the capture of the town, and in full view of the helpless UN, mostly Dutch troops, the women and children were separated from their menfolk and evacuated. The men were never seen again, although some survivors claim to have seen the general supervising at least one alleged massacre. Slowly, the war crimes investigators are recovering bodies from these sites. 1,300 bodies have so far been retrieved. But until those responsible are found and brought to justice, the full truth of what happened at Srebrenica will remain buried with the victims. A mute indictment both of the perpetrators and those who let it happen. Jim Fish, BBC News.
The dominant political party in Indonesia, Golkar, has ended its special congress by electing a new chairman in a secret ballot. It's the first time a free vote has been used. The party is keen to reform following the forced resignation of President Suharto 2 months ago. But the party will continue to control parliament until new elections are held next year.
These delegates had come to take part in an entirely new experience, a free vote. In the days of former President Suharto, they merely gave the nod to his own choice of party leader. Today, they were keen to show off their new democratic procedures. Party veterans said it was time for Golkar to become more independent of the government and get closer to the ordinary people. At stake, as the votes were counted, was control of what is still the most influential political organization in the country. The victory of a close ally of President Habibie's will come as a relief to Indonesia's beleaguered new leader as he struggles to contain a crippling economic crisis. Despite all the congratulations, though, Golkar now faces formidable competition from newly established political parties. After 3 decades of unchallenged dominance, it may find the going tough in the more open political climate of the post-Suharto era. Jonathan Head, BBC News, Jakarta.
Voters are going to the polls in Japan, where the government is facing a stern challenge in elections for the upper house of parliament. The ruling Liberal Democratic Party is struggling to hold on to its 61 seats, already 8 short of a majority, as the country's economic troubles dominate voters' concerns. If the LDP performs badly, it could cost the Prime Minister, Ryutaro Hashimoto, his job. In a final attempt to win more support, his government has pledged to bring in more tax cuts. Well, I've been speaking to our correspondent, Juliet Hindle, as to if people seem to be concerned by the elections.
Well, no. Curiously enough, the Japanese public is rather resigned to the state of their economy at the moment. They don't believe that this election will very much influence the course it takes in the next few weeks. However, we are expecting to see some kind of disapproval for the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. And as the weather is good, ironically, that means a lower turnout, and we expect to see that the LDP will suffer.
So what does that mean for the country? The people, I mean, what are they actually going to be voting on and for then?
Well, people are wanting to make their opinion felt on the economy, and that's really what this election has turned into being about. Normally, upper house elections come and go without much of a ripple. But this time, people do seem to care and are trying to make their feelings felt about the dire state of the Japanese economy.
This will be a blow for the LDP then, because polls were showing that there was going to be a good turnout, weren't they?
Well, polls said there would be a higher than expected turnout, but that still isn't very high. For the LDP, in fact, they don't want people to vote. They feel that if they don't vote, they won't get the protest vote voting against them. But we will have to see. It's a very unclear picture this time round.
You're watching BBC News, and a reminder of our headlines. In Northern Ireland, more violence has erupted as the standoff over a banned march in Drumcree continues into its 7th night. Earlier talks aimed at reaching a breakthrough between the Protestant and Catholic communities ended in deadlock. A post-mortem examination reveals Nigeria's opposition leader, Chief Moshood Abiola, died of natural causes. And coming up later in this program, the party's over in Berlin. Europe's largest techno music festival ends with rows over the clearance costs. Now back to one of our main news points, the burial of the Nigerian opposition leader, Chief Moshood Abiola, who died in detention earlier this week. Peter Byers looks back on his life.
Outside Chief Abiola's house this week, the police hovered nervously in the wake of his death. But their presence was not welcome, and they soon retreated. The crowd surged forward into the compound to sign the books of condolence for the man who had become a symbol of hope for so many.
He was a wonderful man. He stood for Nigeria, the better part of Nigeria, one where we could make things happen, positive economic strides, positive social strides, and democracy. And this is the wake-up call to all our leaders, that we don't have time. We must secure the future for all the Nigerian people.
When Chief Abiola, with his trademark initials MKO, stood for president in 1993, he promised much. He was a business tycoon with the ambition to promote democracy in a country far more accustomed to military rule. The elections 5 years ago were meant to bring an end to a decade of military domination. International observers said the poll had been free and fair. Unofficial figures gave Chief Abiola a clear victory. Although a southerner, he amassed votes across tribal lines in the north. It was a first for Nigeria. But the military annulled the result and postponed the promised transition from military to civilian rule. When Chief Abiola declared himself president a year later, he was arrested and charged with treason. The UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan visited Nigeria at the beginning of this month. He met the country's new military leader, and privately he met Chief Abiola, whose release from detention was by now widely expected. Observers said Chief Abiola had agreed to renounce his claim to the presidency.
That was the agreement that Annan was trying to negotiate, and he was very encouraged by Abiola. Abiola seemed to him to be very realistic and not at all arrogant. He said the country's moved on since 1993, and I know that I'm not going to step straight into the presidency, nor actually do I wish to.
We want freedom! We want freedom! We want freedom! Chief Abiola's death has sparked unrest. Those on the streets want an end to military rule. The passion generated in the past week must be a clear signal to the military that Nigeria is without doubt at a watershed. Peter Biles, BBC News.
Police in Italy have arrested the alleged head of a leading mafia family, Francesco Schiavone, who was seized along with another man near the city of Naples. Schiavone is wanted for murder, arms trafficking, bomb attacks and other offences. He's reported to be a leading figure in the Neapolitan mafia, the Camorra, and a key link with the Sicilian mafia, the Cosa Nostra. Schiavone has been on the run for 6 years. Croatia have secured third place at the World Cup finals after beating Holland 2-1 in the playoff at the Parc des Princes in Paris. Croatia took the lead in the 13th minute through Robert Pozinecki, only for Zenton to equalise 8 minutes later. Croatia's winner came in the 36th minute, Dabosuka's strike, seeing him move clear in the Golden Boot competition for the tournament's leading scorer. Ronaldo would need to score twice in the final against France to join him on 6 goals. Well, Paris is gearing up for the football party of the year as the hosts France meet Brazil in the World Cup final. As David Silito reports, Brazilian fans have brought a touch of carnival to Paris.
The non-stop samba party on the streets of Paris. The French had hoped for a carnival of football. They've got one. The Champs-Élysées turned into a United Nations of soccer.
This Brazilian supporter, very famous. It's not first and second World Cup that he's coming, you know. He's a famous figure from Brazil, you know.
Inside the official World Cup shop, football fever is good business. France 98 may not have made a profit, but the credit cards are working overtime.
They may be planning to sell the World Cup final pitch, but this shop here on the Champs-Élysées is certainly making money. You can see behind me, we've got one till operating constantly. We've got another huge queue and another till, and actually out on the Champs-Élysées you can see the crowds stretching out into the street.
The mascot footix, hats, scarves and shirts. Not all the fans, though, are fussy about who they're supporting.
France and Brazil. I was supporter of South Africa team. But actually I am French, and tomorrow I will support France.
Others just passing by also wanted something to remember this moment by, and they wanted as much as possible.
More pins, and this little guy here, the window clinger. I got the Brazil shirt, 2 posters. I have a scarf for France, a scarf for Brazil, a scarf for the USA, one for every country.
It's our 3rd trip back to Paris, and we brought our kids to enjoy the sights and the scenes of Paris. It's really wonderful. And to be here during the World Cup is fantastic.
The atmosphere is certainly different, not at all the traditional reserved Paris. However, away from the centre, those searching for the city of lovers, rather than the city of lovers of football, can find peace. But even here, the main attraction lay on the streets.
Just the atmosphere, the street parties, thousands of people, loads of men.
But tickets for this great final are desperately hard to get hold of. Prices being asked for have topped $1,000. Nonetheless, it's the final FIFA and Paris had hoped for. The French are finally gripped by football fever and are preparing to take on the champions themselves. And even before the kick-off, the party has begun. David Sillito, BBC News.
The McLaren of World Championship leader Mika Häkkinen will start from pole position for Sunday's British Grand Prix at Silverstone. Häkkinen's time of 1 minute 23.271 seconds was almost half a second quicker than the Ferrari of Michael Schumacher. The world champion Jacques Villeneuve took 3rd place in his Williams. Thousands of Americans have descended on a small Nevada town and jostled for the privilege of being chased by a raging bull. The event at Mesquite is America's answer to Spain's famous Pamplona bull run. The Spanish version is free to all comers, but in Nevada people had to pay $50 for a place in the chase. They came to race down the S-shaped rodeo track, pursued by about a dozen bulls, in a spectacle immortalized in Ernest Hemingway's famous book, The Sun Also Rises. Indonesia's largest volcano, Mount Merapi, has begun to erupt. 6,000 people have been advised to prepare for possible evacuation. Volcanologists said more than 600 tremors have been recorded on the mountain, and lava has begun to flow from cracks on the summit. The volcano has erupted numerous times this century.
Mount Merapi is in the middle of Java Island, one of the most densely populated areas in the world. The ancient royal capital of Yogyakarta, a city of 2 million people, is only 20 kilometers away. But so far, life is going on as normal there, and residents said they weren't aware of the fresh volcanic activity. Lava first began overflowing from the 3,000-meter volcano several days ago. Officials at the Directorate of Volcanology said that only open ground on the slopes has been scorched and no residents have been evacuated. But they said the warning status for the volcano remains at the highest level of alert, as more serious activity might follow. Merapi last erupted in January 1997, and in one of its largest recorded eruptions in 1994, heat clouds killed more than 60 people and forced thousands of others to evacuate. The volcano, which lies 400 kilometers east of Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, lies along what's known as the Pacific Ring of Fire. Mary Louise Kelly, BBC News.
Hundreds of thousands of fans of techno music have transformed the center of Berlin in the 10th annual Love Parade. It's the biggest celebration of techno dance music in the world and one of the biggest street parties in Europe. But how a row follows in its wake over who should clear up after it.
The centre of Berlin reverberated to the thudding beat of techno music as hundreds of thousands of fans turned this city into a giant playground. 50 lorries pulling mighty sound systems processed through the main streets. Not even a torrential downpour stopped music lovers dancing along behind them. The Love Parade started as an impromptu party 10 years ago. Now it's an annual pilgrimage for fans of techno music from all over the world. It's a curse and a blessing for the German capital. Every year, Berlin revels in the extra income, but the Love Parade is classed as a political demonstration, a fact that baffles most Berliners and means the city itself must foot the cleaning bill. Snowplows were deployed last year to tackle the 180 tons of rubbish, and environmentalists despair at the long-term effects of the unknown quantity of human waste deposited in the greenery of Tiergarten Park. Janet Barry, BBC News, Berlin.
Now let's have a look at some of the international newspapers, their front pages, starting with the Hindu and this headline, "Beautiful Brazil set to enact glorious encore." course, the pride and passion of two continents colliding when Brazil and France play in the final World Cup match. Moving on to the South China Morning Post, the headline, province staring disaster in the face, referring, of course, to the Northern Ireland marches, which are celebrating the Protestant King William's 1690 victory over Catholic King James II at the Battle of the Boyne. And then the International Herald Tribune, surprising story this one, given yesterday's story about a population explosion. They're saying low birth rates cause alarm. There are too few newborns in Europe to renew populations. And then let's have a look at some of the British newspapers. The Sunday Telegraph here has a story, government plans to ban head blows in boxing. The Sunday Times, a story here on the right-hand side of the front page. British Airways is going to kill off £60 million worth of ethnic art tail fins. Of course, a lot of controversy about those rather colourful tail fins that we've seen on the British Airways planes. There we are, a look at some of the international newspapers. You're watching BBC News.
Good morning. Yesterday we saw one batch of wet and windy weather push across southern Britain. Today this area of low pressure will be more vigorous, sweeping its way northeastwards across Britain. Sat in the North Sea by Monday, a cool, showery and still quite strong north to northwesterly flow across the country by then. But it will be windier today with a more vigorous low pressure crossing, and it also means that the rain is going to be more widespread. We could in fact approach the record low pressure set in July back in 1956 when the winds hit 90 miles an hour in a gust on the southwest peninsula, so very close today. Those southwesterly winds could certainly touch gale force around exposed coast and hills today, and then as they turn to the north or northwest, as that low continues to push its way out into the North Sea, the North Sea coast then will become at risk during later today and overnight as well. And some pretty rough seas around, so some pretty nasty, even stormy weather to come, I think, during today. So some advice really, because it's unusual for this time of year to get such wet and such very windy weather across Britain. The wettest weather today looks as if it'll be across the north of the country, northern and western parts. The gales likely through the Irish Sea, the English Channel and later the North Sea. But before the cloud and rain come to northern parts, quite a chilly start to the day. In contrast, a very muggy 16 in the south with that cloud and that mist. Now the rain's been making its way into western parts through the night. It'll continue eastwards through the early hours, and by daybreak it'll be affecting many parts of Britain. Heaviest, as you can see, in northern and western areas during today, lighter and more patchy in the south. But even so, it's going to be a wet, dull and misty start for many parts. The air is very moist and there will be a lot of misty low clouds shrouding the hills in fog. Coastal fog as well. A brighter affair for northern Scotland here, just the odd shower around, but some pretty wet weather to come in northern and western areas during this morning, in fact during the day. We should see some improvement coming into western parts as we head towards lunchtime, and that brighter, drier weather may spread southeastwards to many other parts of southern Britain and through the course of the afternoon, away from the southeast that is, but still scattering of blustery showers following, and still that strong gusty wind to contend with. That wind could gust up to around 50 miles an hour. Those southwesterly gale force winds possible in exposed parts, and still continuing wet and rather murky up in the north of the country. The one consolation is that pollen counts will be pretty low during today because of the rain. Nothing to write home about as far as temperature is concerned. Pretty cool in the north under the cloud and rain, and even though the temperature may pop up to 19 in the brighter spots further south, it certainly won't feel like that because of the wind. Now those winds coming in from the southwest at first during today, but as that low continues to track its way eastwards, they turn direction north or northwesterly. Eventually the rain clearing from eastern parts of Scotland and England as we go into Monday morning, but still continuing windy, especially down the east coast, and plenty of blustery showers raining down on that wind. Could be the odd rumble of thunder or hail by then. A very disturbed few days to come.
Warfare is the deliberate use of bacteria, viruses and toxins to kill or maim.
I did a lot of very bad things.
You lied to the inspectors?
Yes. London was a first target.
The targets were supposed to be the black population.
This is a time bomb waiting to go off.
No longer if, but when. In a special two-part series, first-hand accounts expose the chilling reality of biological weapons. Plague Wars, Monday at 10 and Tuesday at 10:20 on BBC One.
You're watching BBC News 24. I'm Alistair Yates with the latest news at 2:30. In Northern Ireland, more violence has erupted as the standoff over a banned march in Drumcree continues into its 7th night. Police were pelted with bricks, stones and fireworks. They fired back with plastic bullets. Earlier, talks aimed at reaching a breakthrough between the Protestant and Catholic communities ended in deadlock. Anti-terrorist police are continuing to question 6 people arrested after attempted firebombings in London. 4 more people are being held in Ireland. The Observer newspaper is publishing new claims about the lobbyist at the centre of the Cash for Access row, Derek Draper. And in a BBC programme, he's described how he bought access to guests. Foreign experts say tests on the body of Nigeria's leading opposition figure, Chief Abiola, showed he died of natural causes. His family had claimed his death in custody was suspicious. Military police in Germany are still looking for 3 of the 4 British soldiers who've been accused of raping a British woman working at an army base in Bergen. 1 soldier is being questioned. Those are our headlines. I'll be back with a full bulletin at the top of the hour. Now it's time for our weekly look at what's been happening in other parts of the world. Here's the BBC's World Affairs editor, John Simpson, with Simpson's World.
There can scarcely be a country in the world which has gone through such extraordinary upheavals in the past quarter of a century. From the mass hysteria of the Cultural Revolution to the wholehearted pursuit of profit, plain and simple. Now it's settling down, but the process obviously hasn't run its full course yet.
Hello, I'm John Simpson. Welcome to my world. This is Beijing, rather unrepresentative part of it, in fact, called Liulichang, which is done up, mostly, primarily, at any rate, for tourists, in the style of perhaps the 1890s. The houses are original, everything's original, it's just that it's all full of antique shops. And it's because we want to look at the past of China and how quickly it's changed that we've come here. My main guest is Jim Laurie of American ABC Television, who's been, I suppose, their mainstay in the Far East for years now. First came to China in 1978, and things were very different indeed. To help us around and speak to other people, we have Denise Bao, our translator, who'll be talking to some of the passers-by that we come across. Jim, the changes since 78, 20 years, I mean, they must be greater in China, surely, than virtually any other country in the world. What sort of place was it when you came here first?
Well, of course, when I came here in 1978, we had just come out of the Mao period. Mao had died in 1976. Deng Xiaoping was just beginning his reform, so there was virtually no private enterprise. They had just embarked upon the great privatization of farms, the so-called contract system, which within the space of 10 years increased the agricultural output in this country by 10 times. It was an extraordinary period.
I remember I was following the Chinese leader of the time, Hua Guofeng, very short-lived leader that nobody remembers now, the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party around, and he arrived in Romania in 1978, the summer of 78, and they came down the steps with his entourage, and all the China watchers around me, all the seasoned journalists that knew the place well, let out a gasp because with him they had women with little white blouses, and this was the first time that people had started wearing something other than Mao jackets, the identikit Mao jackets. When you first came, presumably everybody was pretty much identikit.
They were pretty much dressed the way they had been under the Mao period. We began to see a little bit of change. The first nylon stockings were introduced among women at that time. I know as a journalist, all the stories that I did were first to this. First private restaurant in Beijing in 1980. At the time, there were probably more Chinese restaurants in London and New York than there were in Beijing. There were very few places to go out and eat, these large state restaurants being the principal ones. We did the first person that owned a car. I mean, that was extraordinary.
First private person.
First privately owned automobile. A woman who ran a construction firm just outside of Beijing was able to buy a car. I believe it was a Russian car that she bought at the time. Today we have probably 3 million privately owned cars in China, and every international car maker in here fighting among themselves to sell cars in China.
Well, let's walk along here a little way. I mean, even here, there's cars everywhere. And I think a couple of years ago when I was here, you didn't see cars parked like this. You didn't see, I mean, there's certainly not this type of car either. It's all changing very fast, isn't it?
Well, Volkswagen alone in the last year has sold 250,000 cars. Beijing has a fairly liberal policy in terms of car sales. About 30% of the cars on the road here in Beijing are privately owned. The rest are state or corporate owned. And the result, of course, is massive traffic jams in this city. They've done a great deal in terms of building a road system. Nothing is left of the old roads that I used to travel when I would drive around in 1980, 81. Now you have these big overpasses and highways and whatnot, but they're chock-a-block full of traffic.
And you can't get through. I remember in 1989, I came to China for the first time for what turned out to be the Tiananmen Square demonstration and the massacre, although we didn't expect either of those at the time. And the streets were mostly empty. I mean, there were government cars going around, great big cars, and people were starting to get Japanese cars, but they were state officials, and everybody else rode on bicycles like this chap here. And that was it. Seas of bicycles, rivers of bicycles, and a few cars, and you could get around the place in 10 minutes, 15 minutes across the town.
I was in Shanghai recently, and they're just beginning to introduce privately owned cars. Only 1% of cars in Shanghai are privately owned. But you have to buy a license plate before you buy your car. And sometimes, and there's this bidding process that goes on for license plates, sometimes the license plate can cost as much as the car itself.
Because it's the only way of controlling them, I suppose.
Exactly.
Why do you think they want to control cars there and not control them in Beijing?
Well, Shanghai, of course, is a much more crowded city in terms of density of population. And the road system there is newer than here. They're just getting off the ground with some new road systems. One dealer I spoke to in Shanghai said that if all the people that wanted to buy cars in Shanghai, who could afford to buy, let's say, a car of about $10,000, $12,000, if all of them could buy a car, you'd have 1.5 million new car owners in Shanghai alone.
And the city, I suppose, would die, probably, wouldn't it? I wonder what do you think ordinary Chinese people think about these extraordinary changes in their society? I mean, people's lives have been altered out of any recognition in such a short space of time.
But generally, their lives have been improved. Their housing is improved. All of the things, their food is better today. Generally speaking, their lives are much better. They're much better off than they were when I first got here, when you were here in 1989. So I think people are quite pleased about the progress that has been made here.
Let's see, Denise, if we can find somebody. Can you ask him about how his own life has changed? Is he better? Does he have more money? Can he get more food? That kind of thing.
他说您个人的生活现在好一些了吗？比以前？
生活的条件上不是一个样的。
现在比以前好是吗？
我觉得。
Now it's better than in the past.
以前生活好了。比以前生活好，条件好。
The life condition has been improved. 那有什么那您以前跟现在有什么区别吗？
以前跟现在，那区别大了。
有什么区别 ？Big changes in my life.
那区别大了，他在线那个。
In the past, the state didn't take care of us, didn't look after us. They just ignored us. 您现在家里有电视机吗？
有。
He has a TV set, but in the past he did not have.
Okay, well, thanks very much.
谢谢您啊，谢谢您。
Excuse me. Could I? Well, I was hoping not so much to come into your shop as to speak to you, though. Please. Could we speak to you outside? Can you tell me? A lot of things have changed very fast here in China, haven't they? What do you feel about the changes? Are they good changes?
中国有很变化很大，您觉得您感到这个变化了吗？
变化非常大。
Great changes.
Very great changes. Yeah.
Good changes?
Sure. Surely.
What about your life? How has your life
您
changed?
自己的生活呢，有没有什么变化？
Now it's very good before. Sure.
Better than before, but in what way? How
怎么样？是
precisely?
具体一点，具体一点。
GT now I can about 我现在呢，
你挣更多钱是不是？
这钱有2000多块钱。
Every month I have 2,000 RMB around.
How much is that? About
divided by
$250 or something.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, about 2500块钱。
So 200 pounds maybe. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Very nice to see you. Thank you, thank you. It's amazing though, isn't it, how only in terms of kind of cash and possessions.
Terribly commercial country today. People's, well, I mean, you can understand this. They went through the Cultural Revolution where everybody was equally poor. Mao saw to that. And their ambitions now are to have a good life and to have lots of money. Everybody you meet wants to make money. In addition to that, there's another change in their lives. There is a lot less government pressure. There's a lot less interference in their ordinary lives. You know, back a few years ago when I was here, a foreigner had a very hard time going into a neighborhood, any of these neighborhoods around here. We couldn't go in there easily. We'd be immediately reported by the neighborhood committee. They were women usually with bands on their arms, and they would walk about and report anything untoward to the local Communist Party committee that controlled that neighborhood. And the social pressure that was applied on people in every neighborhood was extreme. Today, it's very, very relaxed. And people can have foreign guests in their homes if they choose to do so. And you don't have that constant intrusion into their lives that the government once practiced.
Do you think, though, that some of our concentrations on human rights is a little bit phony? I mean, are we trying to impose on the Chinese what we would like to see them have rather than what they want?
Except that there are intellectuals, and after all, these concerns of human rights from the earliest times in China have been the province of scholar gentry, of intellectuals. And today you have intellectuals that are very much involved in this democratic reform movement. Since 1989, there has been this shift from the students to the older professors, people writing very extensive treatises about democratic reform and the need to, if you're going to advance further economically, to have a more open system politically. And most of these teachers, scholars, professors are in their 60s and 70s, but just in the last few months, there have been a whole new series of articles that have been written about the need for political reform.
Let's wander on a bit, because I'd like to... I mean, one of the reasons for coming to this area was to see the way in which the Chinese deal with their past and the way in which they kind of treat it and put it on display, sell it to other people here, really. I wonder, for instance, I know that a lot of these places nowadays have Mao goods, don't they? I mean, maybe should we try in this store? Let's try it. So I'm glad to see we do actually have some of Mao. This is rather handsome porcelain bust.
Just about everybody in the 60s had a porcelain bust in their home. Some of these things have become sort of very valuable items now. Because these are perishable, they're breakable, these sell for relatively high prices, whereas...
But sell to whom, though? Not
to foreigners.
To foreigners.
I don't suspect, Denise could help us on this, but I don't suspect there are many Chinese running around buying these.
Not only the foreigners, only the foreign guests coming to China, they're curious about the Cultural Revolution situation in the past. So
what do you think people think about Mao Zedong now?
You mean Chinese people? Actually, he's personally, I think he liberates women. He liberates women to work. So all the men, women, they could work today, but in the past, women cannot.
But I mean, it has to be said, doesn't it, that he was responsible, I suppose, for more deaths than Hitler and Stalin put together.
If not directly, at least indirectly, through his Cultural Revolution, through his negligence during the famine of 1960 and that sort of thing.
Yes.
But he today has become, I don't know, almost a figure of fun. There are theme parks, in a sense, that have Mao portraits. There are restaurants in this town with a Maoist theme. You go in, you eat the kinds of food that Mao ate, and there are his photographs all about, little altars put up with his food around it, the food he liked best. And so young people come, and and perhaps Denise would agree, it's almost that he's a cultural icon that you have fun with.
I would agree with that, yeah.
But he was a monster. He was a monster, wasn't he? I mean, he had thousands of peasant women that had to serve him and serve his desires. I mean, extraordinary.
But Deng Xiaoping had a formulation which he came forth with in 1978, 79, in which he said that Mao was 70% good and 30% bad. And that formulation is still the basic one that is adhered to today in China.
Because his portrait, of course, officially hangs over in Tiananmen Square over the Gate of Heavenly Peace. I mean, that is the kind of key sign that he's still, presumably, politically the right character, the man who, I suppose, dominates still the society. No, not really dominates.
No, he certainly doesn't dominate. In fact, I would suspect most
his
people,
image does.
Well, although even that has been diminished quite a bit. This is a city that used to have quite a few Mao statues and Mao portraits around. When I first came here, there were 4 of them on Tiananmen Square alone. Now there's only 1. Many of the statues to Mao around the country have been taken down quietly. So he's certainly not the figure of adoration, certainly, that he once was.
Can we just ask how much the bust is? Could you ask the lady?
650.
650 RMB divided by 8, it's nearly $80. That's £50. That's a lot for Mao.
But that's nothing compared to what some of these things are fetching. There were a whole series of Mao posters that were very big in the 60s and 70s. And today they are selling in the markets of Hong Kong and elsewhere for thousands of dollars.
But it's a sort of, let's wander on because I'd like to see some other places. I really like this sign. Unlike most other shops on this street, spelt wrong, the Xian Yan Tang is privately owned and operated by my wife and me. Do you think it's true?
Well, in fact, most of the shops nowadays are privately owned. But this probably was the thing back 10, 15 years ago when it may well have been one of the first privately owned shops.
Let's go and see his wife and him. Tiny little alleyways. I mean, this is presumably how Beijing was in the 30s or 40s.
Well, these are called hutongs, these alleyways, and they date back to Manchu times, and so they're really quite old. Very few of them left. I mean, this is a skyscraper city now, Beijing is, and many of these hutongs have simply been bulldozed.
Can you ask him what kind of things, I can see some of the things he sells, but are they genuine things that he sells? Are they genuine antiques? Are they manufactured especially for the tourist market?
您卖的这些东西是真品呢，还是说就是说是仿造的？就是工艺品。
工艺品。
就是工艺品。
哎，也有老的，也有新的。
They are all art crafts, old and new.
Ah, well, that's a rather good way of expressing it, I suppose. Is business good nowadays?
现在生意好做吗？
生意现在一般。
Just so.
Not so many tourists now,
没
I
有太
suppose.
多人来，是不是？没有太多游客来，是不是？
对了，最近人少。
最近人少，比什么时候人少？
因为现在旅游都上各地去玩去了。
Much less than before, because the tourists has gone to the other places of China.
I see you've got there another one of these busts of Chairman Mao. who buys that kind of thing?
就是这个像毛主席的这个塑像，都谁买啊？会有人来买吗？谁买啊？
有人买啊，
谁买啊？
都是外宾买。
都是外国人，没有中国人吧？
对了
，All foreigners, not Chinese.
No Chinese.
No Chinese.
No. Where did you get that one?
您是那个是哪儿来的呀？
这个，
对，
这就是
外地给送来的。
谁给送来的？
这都是景德镇那边做的。
你就说外地
哦
送的。
They bought it from the Chinatown in Jiangxi province of South China.
In the past, you would have had to wear the same clothes as everyone else. You would have had to have the same book by Mao Zedong's sayings, the little red book. You might have had to have had one of those on the wall just to show that you were absolutely rock-solid supporter of Mao Zedong. Otherwise, you could be dragged out, you could even die. But that kind of life has now gone completely, and it's gone very fast. How do you feel about the speed with which it's all changed?
去了呢，还是
过去了，
已经过去了，
已经过去了。
Past. 您觉得这个速度快吗？
就是一个时期，搞那个。
Only a certain period of time.
搞那个，每天向毛主席请示，啊，都带宪章，都拿那个毛主席的语录。
In the past, I report to the picture of Chairman Mao and what I've done today, what I did wrong, things like that. But now I don't have to do that.
When he did that, what did he think in his heart of hearts about what he was saying and about the fact that he had to speak to Chairman Mao's image like that?
您就是跟毛主席汇报思想的时候，那个时候您自己心里是怎么想的呢？
那边是在那个时间，我是个工人，在工厂里头。
In the past, I was a worker in a factory.
那时候是怎么工作，怎么想的，怎么说。
那您怎么想的呢？当时，毛主席怎么讲、怎么想的、怎么说的呢？
在那个时间，就是一心一意的想念着毛主席，做什么工作都是使劲的，都为了毛主席那时候。
I did all my work for Chairman Mao at that time, and I thought so, and I did so in the past.
And then what made him think that it was all a waste of time? At what point did he realize it was just a method of political control?
您觉不觉得那个是浪费您的时间呢？
在那时候是普遍的，你没有个人的想法。
Everybody did so in that period of time. You have no choice.
What does he think about Chairman Mao now?
您现在对毛主席是什么样的概念呢？
现在应该是敬重毛主席，因为毛主席要没有毛主席解放，我们没有今天。
I suppose a lot of people of that age are going to say that. They said the same about Stalin in Russia, didn't they? It's too much part of their lives just to sort of chop out, I suppose.
But as he speaks, we also get a sense of how this country has changed so much. Young people do not think about these things any longer, and it's probably the least ideological country, certainly a communist country now. I mean, people don't think about those things any longer, and they're simply out to improve their living standards, and that is the new ideology of China.
But do you think that there's somebody reporting him and his wife? If they say the wrong thing, does it get known about? Is there somebody that comes around and warns them or punishes them?
The control mechanisms are much less than they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, certainly 20 years ago. But there are neighborhood committees which are supposed to supervise the way people live in each section of every city, every town in this country. And there are neighborhood committee leaders, and they are usually elderly women who keep an eye on things. One area where there's...
Wherever she is.
She has now left us, but she is a neighborhood committee monitor. They're particularly important now in birth control in a country which advocates a one-child policy. It is her job to find out who is pregnant, who is not, whether it's really one child or more. That is one area where she has a great deal of power.
Deeply intrusive, of course.
Intrusive power because she has the right to get answers to any of these deeply personal questions. But on the other hand, she doesn't examine everybody about who they are seeing or whether they have a guest or who. It's much, much less stringent in that way today.
Let's say goodbye to them. There she's come back again. Hello. Goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you very much. Well, she seems quite pleasant about it anyway. Okay, thank you. Well, this is a really charming little backwater, isn't it? But the future of China, presumably, lies with the high-rise buildings, lies with getting money, being stockbrokers, and
acid rock music, and not this
is that
disco.
the future?
I mean, it's a very, very modern society. Young people are out there dancing every night in discos, karaoke. Not this is what China is all about today.
Well, my thanks to Jim Laurie of ABC, perhaps the longest-serving ABC correspondent in East Asia, indeed one of the most longest-serving American correspondents in the area. I think we've had a rather charming insight into the kind of China, as Jim says, which really is dying extremely fast. When I first came to China in 1989, this was still China. Now it's looking a little bit like a museum piece, more's the pity. My thanks also to Denise Bao for guiding us around some curious local characters, not all of whom seem to be as willing to talk as they might have been. Until we meet again, goodbye.
Good morning. This is the area of low pressure we have to contend with today. It's more vigorous than yesterday's low pressure, which means it'll bring us windier weather and the rain will be more widespread. Now that'll sweep northeastwards across the country. The southwesterly winds in southern Britain could touch gale force around exposed hills and coasts. And then as it slips into the North Sea, the winds turn northwesterly, and then a risk of gales down the North Sea coast. So some very windy weather and some very rough seas as well. So a bit of advice really, because it's quite unusual for this time of year to see such wet and windy weather. Almost call it stormy for southern Britain, and it looks like the wettest weather will be for northern and western parts as we go through the rest of today. Now the rain has been making its way into western parts through the early hours of this morning. It'll continue its way northwards and eastwards. The heaviest rain, as you can see, expected across Northern Ireland, Northern England, southern and central Scotland. Lighter and more patchy further south, but very moist air, so a lot of misty low cloud shrouding the hills in fog, coastal fog too, so poor visibilities, adding to some already quite nasty conditions with that wind and that rain. Quite a dull and wet start for many of us. Away from northern Scotland, here's some brighter weather, just the odd shower. And the hope is that it will improve from the west as we go through towards lunchtime, and that brighter dry weather spreading to other parts of southern Britain as we go through the afternoon, but still that gusty southwesterly wind to contend with, possibly some gale force winds and some pretty heavy rain setting in through this morning into the afternoon through northern and western areas, and a lot of hill fog as well. So as far as temperatures go, cool in the north under the cloud and with that rain as well. And even in the south, 19 and a little bit of brightness later today isn't going to feel like 19 because of the strong and gusty wind with it. Those winds coming in from the southwest to start during the day, but as the low slips into the North Sea, the winds turn round to a blustery north to northwesterly, a cool direction. It looks as if it's going to stay and settle for the next few days.
Stories of commitment.
I was sent there as a human being.
I became a national media figure.
Of survival.
It was just chaos, and it was just a sea of people.
I began to feel quite guilty that I'd survived.
Of ambition.
It's probably the biggest thing in Europe, I think. Maybe in the world.
I was thinking about, sitting on top of this rocket, waiting for this launch.
Extraordinary stories from The Face in the Crowd, today 5:30 on News 24 and BBC One.
There is one channel whose unrivaled network of regional journalists work around the clock to bring you the news. Based in more than 40 towns and cities, over 2,000 journalists make up the largest news-gathering team in Britain. Like you, we are unique. BBC News 24.
Deadlock continues in Northern Ireland as Catholic and Protestant leaders fail to agree a formula to end the standoff and violence at Drumcree. Welcome to BBC News. We're broadcasting to the United Kingdom and around the world. These are the headlines. After hours of talks in Northern Ireland, there's no agreement in sight between Catholic and Protestant communities. The talks broke up after leaders spent the day without any result, refusing to meet face-to-face to discuss the crisis. At Drumcree, police have fired plastic bullets at stone-throwing demonstrators after a security cordon was breached. As the Nigerian opposition leader Moshood Abiola is buried, autopsy results suggest he did die of natural causes. In Srebrenica, relatives of those massacred by Serbs call on the international community to act against the perpetrators. Hello, I'm Alistair Yates. In Northern Ireland, talks between Protestant Orangemen and nationalists who end the deadlock over the Drumcree confrontation have ended without results. Informal contacts between the two sides will continue until the talks can be resumed. There's been further trouble in Drumcree itself in the past few hours. Police were pelted with bricks, stones and fireworks. They replied by firing a number of plastic bullets.
The most serious breach of the security cordon since the standoff at Drumcree began a week ago. Demonstrators from the Protestant side scaled the wall erected to block their path down towards the Garvaghy Road and the Catholic area they've been banned from marching down. Police officers moved in, but a volley of missiles came from the far side of the wall, stones and fireworks aimed at the police. When the protesters couldn't be moved, hand-to-hand combat followed on the barricade topped with razor wire. At least 2 men were arrested and taken from the scene. Earlier, the talks between both sides had broken up late on Saturday evening. A statement from the British government said some progress had been made, but several hours of shuttle diplomacy produced no result. The talks started late, and no date has been given for their resumption.
The Orange Order representatives made themselves available for the indirect contact talks this morning at 9 a.m. as requested. It is regrettable that they did not convene until 2:30 p.m. today. We are disappointed that there has not yet been any satisfactory outcome. County Armagh, Grand Orange Lodge and Portadown District remain committed to involvement in a credible process aimed at achieving a permanent and just solution. We urge our members to remain calm at this difficult time. Thank you very much indeed.
The Orange Order has now applied for permission to march down the Garvaghy Road on Sunday. The Parade's Commission will decide whether to approve the new request, but Catholic representatives said the new application didn't show good faith in the talks process.
I think that the filing for a march on the Garvaghy Road tomorrow was a complete insult to the representatives from the Garvaghy Road. It was an insult to the facilitators who mediated between us today, and was an insult to all those people across the whole island of Ireland who were hoping and praying that some form of accommodation could be found.
On Saturday, police released film taken of disturbances the day before and showing a gunman seen at the bottom of the screen firing at officers.
The reality of the situation is that these people are now using the crowds, using children to cut the wire, young people. They're using the cover of the crowds to come forward on our lines. They're using makeshift barricades, and effectively they're trying to get within range where they can kill police officers.
Into the early hours of Sunday, flares lit up the night sky over Drumcree. As the trouble continued, the police replied with plastic bullets. An ambulance was called to attend an injured protester, but with no solution at the talks, there's no sign of an end to the deadlock. Damien Grammaticus, BBC News.
And earlier, one of our correspondents in Drumcree, John Thorne, told me that despite the latest talks, there appears to be no compromise in sight.
The Orangemen, particularly those here around Portadown, insist that they must be allowed their civil right of walking down the Garvaghy Road back from last Sunday's church parade back to their homes. And these proximity talks where the two sides, the residents from the Catholic Garvaghy Road and the Protestant Orange Order men went in separate rooms, and sort of shuttle diplomacy was tried between them, seems to have got us no further forward.
As far as the Catholics are concerned, John, if you can put that into perspective for us, can they not actually see that the Orangemen have a lot of history behind them here, 200 years of history that they want to support?
They certainly have, they know all about the 200 years of history, if not more. 1690 it all goes back to, and the Battle of the Boyne, William of Orange and King James. I think the Garvaghy Road residents know all the history in the background. They say that these marches are not so much part of the Protestant culture, more triumphalism. And they suggest that compromises should be made so that there isn't any suggestion of, in some way, the Protestant majority again showing their domination, as it were, over the Catholic minority by insisting on these marches through areas they're not welcome in. They say that the march can continue elsewhere. And in fact, that is their position, and that's why they are arguing against this particular march in Portadown.
John, it really is a serious problem for the British Prime Minister, Tony Blair, isn't it? Because if these two communities are ever going to be able to live together, somehow, something has got to be done about these marches, being able to, well, as far as the Orangemen are concerned, be allowed to continue in the future.
On the wider front, yes, across the province, that is the worry, in that they have managed to come to this Good Friday Agreement. An assembly's been set up, a First Minister and his deputy, a Catholic, the First Minister a Protestant. It did appear that perhaps this was a formula towards some sort of peaceful future for Northern Ireland. Within weeks, if not hours, this confrontation here at Drumcree has brought out all the bitterness, a lot of the violence again, back onto the streets. And it is a worry if they can't solve this one in particular, as we now approach the 12th day, which is the zenith of all these Protestant Orange Order marches, then how can they think of trying to organise a formula that gives some sort of lasting peace and a way of making the communities live together in the long-term future?
The Nigerian opposition leader, Chief Moshood Abiola, died of natural causes as a result of long-standing heart disease, according to the preliminary results of a post-mortem carried out by a team of international pathologists. The announcement came shortly after hundreds of people attended Chief Abiola's funeral 4 days after he died in military detention.
It was a scrum without the dignity of a funeral, as the masses scrambled to catch a glimpse of Chief Abiola's corpse. This was the man they had elected president, but who's been kept hidden from the outside world in detention ever since. The family had wanted a private funeral, but it was simply impossible to keep the crowds away. His supporters wanted it to be a people's burial, and they couldn't get close enough to their dead hero. This is Nigeria's desperation for democracy in raw display. Outside the gates, there was fury that the military had dared to turn up on the only day the people could spend with their man, who the military had kept from them for 4 years. The police were careful and withdrew to surrounding streets, aware of the explosive mood. It was not a day for confrontation. Today, the people were in charge. A team of foreign doctors carried out a post-mortem on Chief Abiola last night to allay allegations that he'd been murdered. Today they announced that he had died of natural causes, at least from their initial conclusions.
At this time, our preliminary opinion is that the death was due to natural causes as a result of long-standing heart disease.
Their preliminary findings, though, haven't yet been accepted by the family.
You can find people having that kind of condition, living for over 30 years, 50 years, to become 100, to become 80.
As the mourning for Chief Abiola continues, the fears for the political impact of his death grow too. At the very time when compromise is needed to secure the country's future, many feel it's too late.
Chief Abiola was